Join us, the Humanitarian Heartbeat Podcast, on a journey where we delve into the heart of the matters that truly make a difference. Our mission is to create a platform where we can openly discuss topics that often go unnoticed or unexplored. We aim to shed light on these crucial issues and have meaningful conversations. We invite you to tune into our podcast, where we will explore the depths of these subjects and let our hearts guide the conversation. Together, we can create a space where everyone's voice is heard and where we can collectively work towards a better future. Welcome, everyone, to the Humanitarian Heartbeat Podcast. I am your host, Nia Imani, and I have the pleasure of interviewing this man who wanted to know where I was from, Alim Howell. How are you?
I'm doing all right, Nia. How are you?
I'm good, thank you. Now, where are you from?
I'm from Ardmore.
Okay, born and raised?
Yeah. Born and raised in Ardmore. Yeah.
Nice. I love it. Well, as not a lot of people know, but I'm from West Philadelphia, but then I moved to Ardmore, so we never crossed paths, but now we have.
Right.
Thanks to Naj, right?
Mm-hmm.
Everybody, I'm going to read this great man's bio, and we're going to get into it as to why he is so needed and so impactful. Alim is a dedicated community activist and advocate, actively engaged with several nonprofit organizations, including the Race for Peace Committee, Urban Navigation, and Men of Action Brothers of Faith. His primary focus in advocacy and activism centers on addressing political issues, combating violence, and fostering collaboration between the police and the community. Wow. I'm going to start with this, since I ended with this. Why do you want to connect the police and the community? Why is that so important?
Because connecting the police with the community, it's always going to be relevant and it's always going to be important, especially for our Black and brown and yellow communities, because sometimes there's controversy with our police departments, even as a simple traffic stop or just interacting with police officers. The questioning can be more harsh. The interactions can be more harsh with us. But so police and community outreach and police community relations is always good for the community, and it'll always be relevant too.
Okay. Now, what would you say to somebody who says, well, the police are just doing their jobs? If you just listen to the police, then maybe they wouldn't have to speak harshly or with a tone. What would your response be?
You're right on that. That's a good statement. But then again, sometimes the other question is, why do the police have to be more harsh with us? Why is it always us? Like, why do we get that certain suspicion of like, oh, maybe he's gonna pull out a weapon, or maybe he or she, they're gonna get really, really rambunctious and angry and get aggressive with us and try to use force on us and stuff. It's always just a little bit more prejudice, to be honest. But it's a lot better than it used to be, because there's more Black, brown, and yellow police officers on our streets. But then again, still, always, every time maybe you stop a Black, brown, or yellow person, it's just, it's a vibe of like, especially from a white cop, it's just a vibe of like, I wonder what they're gonna try to pull. Or the cop is gonna be real, real cool and be like, look, brother, I'm not trying to hold you up, you're just gonna just is a warning, and just let it go. But yeah.
That's so interesting. I wonder, there's just always so many people and so much conversation around people not really understanding the prejudice that can happen. And sometimes people don't believe that police officers are prejudiced. They're just doing their jobs. Have you experienced something where a police officer was prejudiced to you or your friends, or are you just talking things that have happened globally or even internationally?
Right, the last part. Things that happen globally and internationally. You see YouTube videos, you see on social media, certain videos from out of state, stuff like that, where it can be a really controversial police stop. Me personally, as a teenager growing up, I always have been gotten lucky because then I have my grandfather who knew the superintendent of police. You know, Ardmore, Black Ardmore, it's like a small knit community, so that everybody basically knows everybody, and then your police people and the politicians, everyone just knows everybody. So then, growing up in a certain neighborhood, you may not get as in trouble, but then if you're going out of state and
Mhm.
then where no one knows you and you don't know anybody, then that's a lot different.
Mhm. That's so interesting. Is that what also made you want to talk about violence? Have you experienced that with yourself, or are you talking about globally as well?
That now the violence part, that's because I did lose an older brother to gun violence. So
Mhm.
then that's that. But then also the crime rate is still out of this world in Philly. You know, the police commissioner Bethel out of Philly, he said it's going down, which it is, and Mayor Parker, but then it doesn't it just doesn't seem like it because they said, I think they said the last time it was the 40th percentile.
Mhm.
You know, the 40th percentile, to be honest, in the outside looking in, that's like an F letter grade. You know what I'm
Right.
saying? You want to really raise that percentage, and they really want to raise that percentage to like more like the 80th percentile, so that it can be more like a B plus B letter grade. So then, you know, things will really get down in Philadelphia. And then my thing is, out of these, ever since 2020 started, it seems like Philly, it's always the same old, same old. I just saw a news story just last night or the night before. It was someone got shot in Philly, and they were just watching TV.
Mm.
You know what I'm saying? And that was in I think that was North Philly.
Mhm.
And that was a big story. And you know, that's the ridiculous part. It's just like it's like the same thing every single year from the 90s to the 2000s, 2010s, 2020s. It's like, when is it? We call it the city of brotherly love and sisterly love. And then when the Eagles won the Super Bowl, that was a good vibe. Why can it always be that vibe? Life is life. But then, like, with this crime rate and violence, you would think Philadelphia is like the most tight knit community, lovable community. But then it's just, we even have a love statue sign. I mean, you know, it's just, but it's not, though. That's the thing. It's not.
Yeah. Can you share, if you feel comfortable, what is it like losing a loved one, especially
Oh,
to gun violence?
mhm. You know, it's upsetting. But then knowing my brother and then you know, knowing my siblings real well, they would want me and everyone else in the family to be tough. You know what I'm saying? Not hold it in, let it out, but then like, you know, don't harp on it and think on it too much. We're in heaven now. We're, you know what I'm saying? Just keep doing you and keep going. Certain, you know, family members, they had that nice, outgoing, and then strong personality where they wouldn't want you to be like all down in the dumps all the time anyway. So,
Mhm.
you know, after a good after a good half a year, I would say I felt a lot better because I know I'm like, you know, this is ridiculous. They wouldn't want me to keep thinking about them and all that stuff. They're in my heart and my prayers, but then they just would want me to move on with life, you know, because that's how they were. They were tough and stuff. So,
Yeah.
but it's hard to hear because, you know, when my father first told me, you know, he said, your brother got murdered. And I was just like, you know, I didn't know what to believe. I was just like, so it can happen to anyone. Because
Right.
you think that, oh, it's not going to happen to yourself and hit home for you. But you know, now I can say I'm one of the statistics too of like losing
Mhm.
a gun violence statistic for a loved one, you know, but you just gotta move on and move forward. But it's upsetting because you never want someone to pass in a violent way. You know, you would rather it be, you know, not anyway, but just
Right.
not violence though, where someone's gonna, you know what I mean by like someone's out to get you and get something and attack you. That's like the worst way to go out.
Right.
You know what I'm saying?
Right. Right. I'm so sorry that you and your family experienced that. Were you
Mm.
younger when this happened?
No, that was just in 2018, 2017. So that was
Wow.
not too long ago, but almost a good five more years. You know.
Yeah. So do you feel like, um did you feel this burning passion around gun violence prior to your brother's passing, or you felt this passion since his.
Afterwards,
Yeah.
afterwards. My father started the Race for Peace community in 2016, but then it was afterwards when my brother got shot. I felt like, oh, I see what's going on now. You
Yeah.
know, you just it's a wake up. It's a big wake up. You know, and that's why I'm so aggressive at times and contacting and interviewing and stuff because you know it has to go down. And then I wish I could have a good sit down with Mayor Sherelle Parker and
Mm.
Kevin Bethel, which they know who we are. Especially they know my dad and stuff. But then you know they probably didn't heard it already, but they really need to like fix it though.
Yeah.
Like it's a lot of talking, a lot of the budget, the money, and millions of dollars. But then like when is it going to actually get fixed though? It seems like money and all this stuff, but then it's just like, well, they gotta actually fix it though too, because it's like the same hoopla. I was talking to a state representative staff member, Regina Young. That's my
Mhm.
father's district. He lives in State Rep Regina Young's district.
Mhm.
I was talking to her constituent service advisor, Mr. Fassett, and he was saying, "You're right," and he's older, around my father's age or older than that. You know, he was saying all this hoopla and rah rah in the street and the events and stuff is good, but then again, he's like, it needs to actually get fixed though too. And it's up to the politicians. That's the thing. It really is up to them.
Do you okay? So 2 point question. Um, is it really up to the politicians or is it up to the people in the community to end gun violence?
I see what you're saying. It is up to the people in the community and gun violence. Like if you do the crime, you do the time. If you're gonna act crazy and out of pocket, then that's what you're gonna do. But then again, somehow, some way, how are these illegal guns coming into our streets? Just like when coronavirus happened. How did it came in, what I'm saying, from a different from China and stuff. But then again, couldn't that have been avoided back then? We all had to wear masks and stuff. It's always something that the political government can do to try to avoid things. Like they're doing right now currently. Trump is doing the ICE, the immigrant, which I don't agree with at all. But
Mhm.
then you see how they're doing something about illegal immigrants and stuff, which I don't agree with. But then still, they're doing something. Now, imagine if they did something like that as intensive with the guns, illegal guns and stuff like that. If they were as intensive with that, then you wouldn't see hardly any illegal ghost guns on these streets.
What can they do? Do you have like so you say you have an opportunity to sit down with Mayor Parker and everybody else. What would be your solutions to eliminating violence?
My solutions would be more gun buyback programs, which that's been done before, but a lot more. They need to have that like once a month, once or twice a month, every single month of the year. And that's the first step. Sometimes it's baby steps. The second thing I would do is try to have more community outreach with having what do you call them, the town halls and stuff like that at churches and local churches in Philly and stuff,
Mhm.
and doing that once or twice a month, where the mayor herself and the police commissioner himself actually show up themselves with their team and staff members and
Mhm.
speak to the people about what do you think is going on. Imagine having that once or twice a month, every single month of the year. You know, they're busy schedules and all that, but then there's really no excuses at this point because it's the same thing over and over again.
What do you think about conflict resolution? Or because I think about like, I'm from West Philly and I think and not that every city, every town, every whatever has the same issues. But what do you think about if you and I get into an argument, right?
Mm.
And I have no conflict resolution skills. So instead of me maybe beating you up or maybe cursing you out, I decide to shoot you, right? So what if there's more conflict resolution styles implemented that may help, or just learning how to diffuse anger in yourself? If I get angry with you, maybe I won't beat you up, maybe I won't curse you out, maybe I'll meditate, maybe I'll take a walk, maybe I'll breathe a little bit. I think that may help. What are your thoughts about that?
Conflict resolution. Um, that's more. It's more mental health resources. I would think
Okay.
about that. More
Okay.
mental health resource because sometimes the way people are, they're going to be themselves. And then one other person said he was saying sometimes it's drugs. Like some people that use gun violence, some of them are like under the influence,
Mm.
which that's like I agree with that statement, but then it's like almost like you're defending them too, though. It's just to control anger and stuff like that. It's more mental health solutions. But the first step is, why did they have a gun and how did they get a gun in the first place, especially when it's an illegal one? Now, if they brought it themselves and they have a right to bear firearm and right to bear arms,
Mhm.
um, that's different because they brought their own gun and stuff. So then that's more going back to mental health, more mental health resources, especially if you're having thoughts about harming someone, then that's mental health.
Okay. And then what about people who, you mentioned COVID, right? Um, who don't have the resources to eat, don't have a job, don't have this. Like, have you considered those pockets or those avenues as to why violence may have increased? Like the lack
Um,
thereof of resources?
right, the lack of resources. And are you saying that those are the people that are mostly committing the crimes?
I
The
wouldn't say
people that
mostly, but I think that if there was a breakdown, I would say if there would be a percentage. Like just like I don't think every criminal is on drugs or high. I think sometimes is this is my block and you're not supposed to be on my block. So that's pride. I think that's conflict resolution. You made me angry, you embarrassed me in front of my people, so now I got to make an example out of you. So I think there's what are your thoughts on that? I don't think there's always like cookie cutter. I think there's situations where it's pride, it's lack of resources, it could be mental health, like you said, it could be drugs, it could be alcohol, but there's different avenues. What do you think about the other avenues that it could be?
I think it's more the pride, like you said.
Okay.
I think the resources part, when you see a shooting and stuff, especially coming out when it's our people doing it,
Hmm.
I think it's more of a pride thing. And
Okay.
it's like, all right, I'm gonna take him out, and then and it might be smoking and the drugs too, though. But then also it's the pride too. I think they do have resources. They have a home they can go to, and they
All the
have
time?
even, I would say 7 or 8 out of 10 times, because especially when it involves teenagers, it's the parents. They have parents. They
Do
just
they
might not
all the
be getting
time?
all the a 70% they do.
Okay.
Those teenagers, yes, because then they're students, and then sometimes they're just not getting the most attention they can get out of their parents,
Okay.
but then they still have parents. You know what I'm saying? They have cousins and they have brothers. Especially black families. There's always at least if there's not a daddy, you know what I'm saying? There's always someone we can go to. There's always somebody.
I think there's an exception to the rule, though. I think
Mhm.
that, collectively, we think Black people always have a cousin or, things like that. But I know of a lot of cases where it's like, it's just me and my mom and my sister. And I don't know my dad. This is just an example. And my mom
Mhm.
is a nurse. So, she works 12 hours and it's just us. So that is, so maybe yeah, I have neighbors, but I don't really have cousins. Or if I do, they live in South Carolina. We're not that connected. I think that happens a lot of times. No? Do you not agree?
I partially agree with that.
Okay.
I part because, like you said, for the example, it's your mother and your sister, so you have two people. It's just, and then also sometimes with black people, you can always go into someone else's family force and then just interact with them. You know what I'm saying? It's always like that with our people. It's like it's violent and stuff, but then again, it's just like having family oriented vibes. You can always reach out to someone. There's the church, there's the basketball, the sports teams. It's just there's always somebody. It's always been like that, even since it's just always been like that, and that's the vibe. I'm just coming off of my own experience,
Right.
being born out and raised out of Ardmore and stuff. Everyone's almost related to everybody. It's always been like a family oriented ride and stuff. You know what I'm saying? So it's just like there's always someone you can talk to,
I
but
I get,
suburb or city.
yeah, but I think that people who, and I'm just playing devil's advocate, I think that somebody who would listen to that, they're gonna be like, Aline, you live in Ardmore. Like it's a different vibe than Kensington. I'm just making that up. So yeah, I'm glad that you have that community where if you didn't have your wonderful family, you would have other neighbors and family members. But Ardmore is different than Kensington. What would you say if somebody was like, Aline, you can't compare the two?
You can't compare the two with the neighborhood because
Okay.
maybe one neighborhood is more suburban than others, but sometimes the houses look the same size and stuff, and it can be as fancy as inside as the other one. But then again, it's the crime rate in a neighborhood. So there's way less crime in Montgomery County than there is in the
Hmm.
city of Philadelphia. There's less crime. But then again, with that part, it's just like there's still people you can talk to. There's churches in Philly, there's community centers in Philly, and there's still schools in Philly and people you can talk to in Philly too. It's just maybe your home environment is a lot different, but there's still people you can talk to on the block, especially the barbershops. The barbershops, there's always someone to be there, no matter if you're from the city or from the county. But yeah, that goes back to just yeah, that's what I'll say about that. Yeah.
Okay, okay. You have a comeback for everything. I'll say that. um, talk about Race for Peace Committee and Urban Navigation. Tell us about that, about those two
So
organizations.
yes. So Race for Peace Committee, that's a nonprofit organization. It's for police community outreach and then to have events in the local Philly and counties and stuff. And then police officers come out to the events and interact with citizens in a positive way. And Urban Navigation is for ATV dirt bike riders and for youth who want to do producing music, video gaming, stuff like that. I'm trying to get on Mr. Don Jackson. He's also the co-founder of Philadelphia Technician Training Institute. That's his organization. And I'm trying to get on him more and invite more youth. We have a lot of youth come out to the basketball game events at the Darby Barrel Rec in Delaware County. But then I say to him, like, maybe you can invite people more to that Billy Penn Studios and the youth there. So then to invite the school districts, you have the elementary, middle school, high schools in like a local area. So like the Shack, we had the Penguin, then we got LM. Harridan's a little farther, but the two schools that are right around the corner is LM and Penn. So like same thing for that Billy Penn Studios. I would want to invite like the local schools right near the address and
Hmm.
then see if they can come out to do that, to go to the studio, instead of just having one or two events a year where a lot of youth come out, but then having more on a monthly basis than a yearly thing.
Okay. Do you think that's going to happen this year or maybe next year? That
Probably next year.
okay.
Probably next year. Yeah.
Okay, that is awesome. And why those two organizations? Why, because you could join or be a part of any organization, but why those two in particular for you?
Well, the two, because my father is the founder of one, and my father's best friend, Mr.
Okay.
Don Jackson, is the founder of the other one. So then it's very close knit and a family type thing. So then I know I can trust my father, of course, and I can trust Mr. Jackson because he's my father's best friend. They grew up on the same street and Logan, Philly, and stuff. So then, it's a trust thing sometimes. And then they'll let me certain things I wanted to do, like they'll let me branch off and basically do whatever I want as long as it's not not inappropriate and not like I'm still staying in my lane and promoting it well. And then if something huge comes up, usually it's like the events and stuff,
Mhm.
that's when they'll talk to the news and stuff and then in person at the event. So usually I do like pre-interviews and I'm doing like interview with you and then off stuff interviews without the events. So I'm still staying in my lane and stuff, but then they let me blossom and I got my name out there the way I wanted to, you know. So
And
that's
you got your name out there by doing what you're doing?
mm-hmm.
That's
Yeah.
amazing. How does that feel? Because you're passionate about all this. How did that feel to get your name out there?
It it feels good. It feels good. At first I was a little skeptical about it because I didn't know where it was really gonna take me. A lot of us, a lot of people that I talk to and stuff, they may not say it, but everyone wants to be, or almost everyone wants to be like, an A-list Hollywood celebrity, know how it feels, especially financially, but then again, it's just like what we're doing in the community and stuff, it's still good. Some people want way more popularity, but
Hmm.
then me included, but then you just have to take it stride and stride at a time and
Hmm.
then just realize it has to be relevant, it has to be on point, it has to make sense. But then it feels good to get my name out there in the state. That's what I would say. But then to the whole world, you know, that's another thing. Kind of like how Dr. Umar, kind of like
You
how
want to be like
he's
him?
like an American activist rather than like a local activist.
Hmm. I got you. I got you. Now, I think this is a key one, especially with all that's going on. What are some of the most pressing political issues that you believe need immediate attention?
It's like we were talking about the gun violence.
You would
That's
say
the
that's number one.
that's number one, the gun violence. And then that's my only focus really is gun violence and police community relations because it comes together. The gun violence is what the problem is in Philly. You Google Philadelphia and then you click on news. That's mostly the stories is gun violence. And then almost every other day there's a story on gun violence for the city of Philadelphia. So I would say it's the gun violence. They don't really press the issue as much. They don't unless like something happens, like when George Floyd, that was years ago now. And when something big happens, then they press the issue like, oh yeah, we have to talk about this now. But then they should be doing that every month,
Mm,
you know. But it seems like they're more focused on the budget and stuff like that
mm.
and the finance of things, which that's important too. But then it's the gun violence though. What would you say?
I think there's a lot of pressing issues, but I definitely agree with you with gun violence. I've had my cousin passed away. We called her Pebble. She passed away. I don't even think I was born yet. But I've had some friends who passed away from gun violence. And I do think there's a lack of community and village. So, like, I was born in 92. So, when I may have acted up or whatever, like, the neighbor could correct me. I was respectful to my mom. They always said like back then you did bad things at night and not during the day, things like that. And I do think there's a lack of community. I think there's a lack of village. I think there's a lack of empathy and maybe conscience. Um, and I'm not really sure how to fix those things, but I think at the basis, I do agree with you that politicians have somewhat control, but at the heart of it, I think that we should get back to we are truly our brothers and sisters keepers. So why would I want to do any harm to you? And I think that's what's missing. Um, I think there's a big gap. My mom always talked about growing up in Philly in the 60s. And of course they had their stuff, but they had a village, they had community. And I don't think we have that much of a village or community now.
Yeah, I wonder why that is. It does seem things are like more the 2020 era with Gen Z. We're millennials, but then the Gen Z and stuff, and it is kind of like different now. I don't know what it is. It's just more nonchalant stuff. Is just less of like that excitement vibe. It's just more, I don't know.
I think we're definitely less respectful. As soon as we have a brain, it's like you can't tell me what to do, and I don't know. I'm not putting the blame on our parents, but I feel like so my grandmom learned from my great grandma, and she was born in 1910. So it was respect, it was village, it was all of that. And then my mom learned from my grandmom. And I'm not blaming my mom because I think she did a great job, but I do think that you learn a lot from your parents and your parents' community. And I wonder what that missing piece is, why our parents, for the most part, although there was a crack epidemic and all of that, um, what's that missing link where they were still part of a phenomenal generation, and then what happened with us? I don't know. I don't know.
Yeah, I think our generation, the millennials, we grew up more old school than the Gen Z.
Yes.
That's when we're definitely more old school. But then, I think it's just that old school mentality and vibe it's not there anymore. It's just not. It's just
Yeah.
stuff is like which, I can see, I can get down with the Gen Z a little bit and see how they are and stuff. But then again, it's like they're not as old school. I don't the respectful part, I don't know that either. I guess they're just more like just I don't know. Yeah.
I heard one of my mentors, he gave an example of back in the day, you would not wear like for example, baggy pants. That was disrespectful because the disrespect was you didn't want anybody to see your underwear, things like that. And if for whatever reason your belt, you didn't have a belt and it was showing, somebody could say to you, "Hey, Aline, pull up your pants," for example. Then he mentioned now, if you say that to someone, and not just all the time, but this is just his example that you may catch an attitude like, don't talk to me. Like, you're not my parent. You can't, so that's why I said it's that lack of respect. It's different because we couldn't do that. If somebody said, Nia, button up your shirt, guess what? I'm buttoning up my shirt, you know? So I don't know, but I just wonder how we can help our community. Like to know, hey, Alim, I would never hurt you. I may not like you, but I want you to live a great life. You may get on my nerves and you may do something, but I'm not going to hurt you. And I want us to teach others that, and that's why I mentioned conflict resolution. You make me mad. And I might want to slash some tires, but I'm not because I know how to handle my anger. I have that emotional intelligence that I wouldn't say I was born with it, but I learned that as I got older and got angry. Okay, Nia, you don't have to curse. You can pray, or you can do yoga, or you can exercise, or you can do something, and I think this is what we need to teach others.
Right. I agree. And what you're saying is basically it goes by getting older. Like, birthday by birthday, you're gaining a year of age and stuff. It's just, the older you get, like the old saying, more wisdom, and then the older you get, the more mature you get some time, and then just I guess it goes by age. But then for Gen Z versus millennial, our generation, it's like they are different from us though. And I don't know. It just seems like all this technology is do you think that's helping or is it hurting? Because back then in the 90s and 2000s, remember, there was no Instagram. They didn't have it. They didn't, man, I'm actually, they didn't have Instagram. It wasn't no Instagram. It was just coming out.
We
But
had
then,
AOL dial-up. That's what we
right.
had.
AOL, yeah, AIM.
Yes, we had
Yeah, AIM.
MySpace. MySpace was popping.
MySpace. Yeah,
Yes,
that
we had the Nokia flip
Facebook.
phone.
We did Facebook. Yeah,
Yeah,
Facebook.
but that was still kind of new. Like,
Yeah, but the
I think
Twitter and the Instagram, that yeah, all
no.
that.
I
Maybe it was just more you had to be in person.
yeah.
It had to be communication, in person. Like it wasn't no like the iPhone was out then, but it wasn't like as popular as it is now.
That was new, yeah, because we still had the iPod. My niece's age, there was
Mm,
an iPod. Like
mm.
yeah, all that's new. So I think it's
Yeah.
helping and hurting. Like it's hurting the communication. And I think, and I don't know if this ties into violence, but I think it ties into insecurity. We post our success. We don't post, when you're depressed or when you're this. So it seems like
Some people do.
true. But for the
Yeah.
most part, it seems like everybody's winning. I'm 32 years old. She's married with 2 children and she has this car and she has this, and it can play on insecurities if you have them some. So I think that it hurts that way. But in that snapshot, in that reel, you don't know somebody's story. You don't know. Yes, you see this beautiful couple and their children, but you don't know that she had 5 miscarriages. You don't know that she went through abusive relationships before she met her kid. Just things like that. But I think it hurts that way. But I think it helps with disseminating information and the right information, right? So I think it's 50-50.
Yeah, you're right about that because social media social media is good because sometimes like when you can't communicate say with a friend family member that's far away, say if they're out the country or something, that's with like the FaceTiming. I think all that was originally made for like that stuff, and then communicating with your friends if you don't have their cell phone number, stuff like that. But like that's what like social media is for. Now posting stuff about your happiness and your attributes and your awards and stuff, that's good too because sometimes that motivates people and all, that's a motivator. But
That's
then
true.
yeah, but that's one thing too, you never know what someone's going through in life, and that's another thing. Like, it's not always Disneyland and cotton candy and Disney World and all that stuff. It's just you know you got to make sure that you're mindful of everyone because some people may not be in the most happiest place in life. Some people, it's just you know down the dumps, or just you never know what someone's going through. But you know you just gotta try to be confident and get through it, because life is hard, but it's just you got to get through it and stuff, and just yeah.
Yeah. How can people, if they want to volunteer with you, is that a possibility? How can they get in contact with you? Is that a possibility to say, hey, Alim, I too want to combat violence and connect the community with police officers? How can people connect with you?
The best thing to do is go to our events. And then we want more people to come out to the events. And then we have the Facebook page, Race for Peace on Facebook. And that's the best way to contact and see about events, because we do have events in the community. And then we just want people to just show up to them and then see if they're interested in the police officers and stuff like that. Some people's mindset will never change, which that's fine, because everyone's entitled to their own opinion. But then, if you want to come out, especially with your family and stuff, and see police officers and talk to them, then our events are perfect for that. So then,
Awesome. That's awesome. Where do you see yourself like in 5 years? You are this activist, you're doing great things with these organizations and nonprofits. What is your ultimate goal?
in 5 years,
Or 10, or,
I don't know. You know, you know, in 5 or 10 years, what am I doing? At this point, especially how stuff is nowadays, we just don't know. Like, stuff is like so like different now. Like in 5 or 10, I could tell you what I'm doing a year from now. Still
Okay.
same thing, keeping the nonprofits alive and active, and going to work and just doing what I did, and just being, just but 5, 10 years, I don't know. That's the thing. See, you can't plan stuff out. That's another thing. Because when I was in high school, they asked the same questions our senior year. My teachers in college would say, "Where do you see yourself 5 years from now?" And I said something completely different. I didn't know I was going to be the activist and all that stuff. See, that's what I'm saying. It's like you can't plan stuff out. Only God and wherever the wind blows, people. That's the whole point. Because when I was 17, I had a completely different answer. I thought I would have played sports in college, did that, then got a job, and then had a family and all that by now. But I did the activism thing, so that it was completely different. I thought I was gonna be like an athlete, but then that was completely different from activism. But then in 2016, my father started something, and then all of a sudden I'm doing activism. You know what I'm saying? So like 5 years from now, I would say hope I'm healthy, and then still family oriented, and then that's it. Healthy, alive, and active. That's basically what I'll say about that one.
Love it. I love it. And you're, like I said, you're an activist, you're a brother, you're a son, you're a friend, you're a community member. But if I had to say, Alim, who are you? What would you say?
I'm an activist now, advocate, and then I'm funny, and then that's pretty much it. Like funny activism type of guy, and then I think that's basically it. I don't know.
Okay.
Yeah.
Is there anything else you want to share? Anything that's on your heart that you really want to drive home to our listeners and viewers?
Oh yes, go to our Race for Peace Facebook page and come out to events, and that's it.
Thank you. Thank you so much for sharing your story. And a lot of it was very personal and hard, but we appreciate your honesty and transparency. You guys heard Alim. Make sure you follow the Facebook page. What if they want you to be like a keynote speaker? Can they reach out to you somehow?
Yes, almost everyone has my email. Yeah, for the keynote speaker part.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay. What's your email?
ah. Then my name, then at Gmail or at myyahoo.com.
Okay. Okay. You guys heard it from Alim. Thank you so much for listening to us. This is the Humanitarian Heartbeat Podcast, and we'll talk to you soon. Bye bye.
Thank you for joining us on the Humanitarian Heartbeat podcast. Remember, each conversation brings us closer to a world where compassion thrives. Stay connected, stay informed, and let's keep the heartbeat of humanity alive. Subscribe, share, and be a part of our journey to make a difference, one conversation at a time. Until next time, keep your hearts open, your minds curious, be a blessing to others, and give agape love. God bless.